We are back on My Mayor, and joining me is candidate Darden Rice. Hi, Darden.
Hi, Joe. Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Good to see you. How's life on the campaign trail?
Things are going really well. Our vote by mail ballots started landing in people's mailboxes, and our team is working on chasing those ballots now. We had a great event with Victory Fund, Ruth's List, and Equality Florida Wednesday night at Station House. And I just had a great interview on ABC this morning to talk about my campaign and my vision and experience.
All right. Well, they've set the bar. Let's beat it. We're talking about your
Right.
content diet today. We're looking at
Yeah.
where do you absorb your content from, your news, your non-news, and your sort of fun, recreational, guilty pleasure stuff. So excluding the catalyst, where do you get your news from?
Every morning I listen to two podcasts. I listen to NPR's Up First, and I listen to the New York Times, The Daily, and I get to listen to that while I'm getting ready or driving to work. And then I also subscribe to the Tampa Bay Times and the New York Times, both digitally and the hard copy. And of course, I read the Catalyst. So that's where I get a lot of my news. I like to sometimes graze Twitter to just look at what people are thinking and saying, and keeping up with what some other cities are doing. But yeah, those are pretty much my main news sources.
So the ones that you mentioned were kind of the traditional news outlets. With things, the Catalyst being an example, there's a lot more opportunity for other types of sort of alternate news sources to proliferate now. Even just down to big presences on social media, to more organized things like some of the smaller news orgs we see in the area. So how has that impacted your absorption of news? Do you find that there's value in that, or is the cost sometimes with the lack of maybe objectivity or things like that maybe more dangerous than maybe the value it provides?
Well, I'm a history major, so I always keep in mind the source of the news that I'm reading, and try to be aware of how objective or what slants or leanings my news sources might have. I think it's good for me to keep up with traditional news sources because I think that's what most people are reading and looking at. But I also like to supplement it with keeping up with things on Twitter from specialized blogs. There's a lot of blogs out there on where we have a lot of new urbanism and urbanistas talking about everything from very city related, everything from transit to housing to the arts. And I think Twitter provides a great way to kind of graze through that information that helps supplement or fill in what you're never going to see in a regional newspaper.
And then as we move into non-news type of learning, where do you go for that?
Well, I love to read books on adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership that I actually studied with Marty Linsky, and I'm inspired by that type of leadership. That's my style. It's all about leading people through change, which is what we're going to be doing a lot of in the next few years. I'm very thankful that we have the presence of the Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete, and through their lecture series and their book club offerings, I've been able to listen to and read Richard Rothstein on the color of law, be exposed to authors like Ibram Kendi on anti-racism and Robin DiAngelo on white fragility. So I'm really grateful to learn more about the racial justice movement through the eyes of those authors. And that's just kind of a tip of the iceberg of some really good literature out there on racial justice and equity. Also, and this is probably no surprise, there's a new podcast that I love listening to, hosted by Richard Florida, and it's called The Mayors. And it's an interview, it's about a half hour, 45-minute interview with various mayors throughout the country. And it is just loaded with so much great information and insight. So that's my latest podcast that I've been hooked on.
And you mentioned absorbing some content on leadership and leading through change, and then you followed that with some subjects that are definitely in the process of some big changes. So, what have been the emerging as you combine those two areas of learning? What have been the emerging themes with regard to leading through that type of change? Your guiding philosophies.
Well, leading through change is important because change is loss. And you have to help people process loss, whether that's losing a travel lane to a bike lane or losing what you feel like your community character is when an older building is torn down. You have to really communicate and stay with people through change. And it's a different mindset, it's a different skill set. It takes a lot more work because there's a lot more back and forth. It's a little bit messier up front, but when you really engage with people and it's a two-way conversation and you're working with people and kind of staying with them through the stages of the work, you do get to better outcomes. And if you try to skip through those stages, you find out that you have to go back and start over because you really can't skip over doing that type of work with the public. So I love really just kind of feasting on that type of, reading and ideas. And I think definitely the adaptive leadership is going to be real. That approach is going to be really important as we grapple with, issues of, what does it mean to truly have policies that reflect improvements in equity in a measurable way. And it's exciting thought leadership. And I think that having a strong understanding of that is going to be ultimately necessary and beneficial to running a city like St. Pete.
It's insightful. Thank you. So the fun stuff. What do you do for recreation, guilty pleasure? Where does that content come from?
Well, I am quintessential Generation X. So anytime, periodically, it's fun to watch the Spinal Tap mockumentary for just some fun and silliness. I love Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. It's written so well, and Selena Myers is this really hysterical character. And Joe, I was trying to flip through to see if there was like a funny Selena quote I could share with you, but I don't think there's anything I can really share on broadcast. But Veep is a fun one. And then lastly, I have to say my all-time favorite that I've just really enjoyed the last few years is Schitt's Creek. And it's an unlikely story, sort of a reverse Beverly Hills story. But ultimately, it's about love, dedication, joy. But it really sneaks up on you with a very powerful story about acceptance. And the characters you just come to learn to love. And it's also hysterical. It's a funny show. So that's my fun content and guilty pleasures.
So with your guilty pleasures, one of the consistent themes through them was humor. All of them had some element of being funny. Being humorous or being funny as a leader is a tricky thing. It's an easy place to be attacked. So if elected mayor, what would you bring to bear as sort of your philosophy on humor and that presence as mayor?
There are a few public officials who are really good at, as you get to know them, you do sense that sense of humor that they have. And yeah, I've had a lot of friends say to me that, Darden, a lot of people don't realize, you can be really funny. I think what's so important is as a public official, your humor has to be self-deprecating. It can never be anything that's directed at other people, but a wry understanding at the conditions of life and the things that are foisted upon us and how we just handle it with the best grace possible. That's, I think it was Oscar Wilde also that said, and this is important for me because I can be a truth teller, that I think Oscar Wilde said, when you tell people the truth, be prepared to make them laugh. Otherwise, they're going to kill you. So having a sense of humor always does help.
Got it. Darden Rice, thank you. Join us on
Thank
My
you.
Mayor, and we'll be back in a couple
Okay.
weeks.